This is Kentucky Afield Radio. This is Ron Rohde, Kentucky Afield's first host back in 1953. Now, I'm proud to present Charlie Baglin.
Something old, something new, something highlighted in blue. We go inside outdoors and inside the 2014 edition of the Kentucky Fishing and Boating Guide to discuss a few new regulations. Jerry Bynack is a key contributor to this publication. He is the second in command with the Division of Fisheries of our Commonwealth. We'll cover the new stuff you need to know before you go. All next on Kentucky Afield Radio.
Kentucky's Nature and Wildlife Fund. You see it as a contribution option when you prepare your state tax return. But you also see it as songbirds and wildflowers. You can see it in clear, flowing streams. Sometimes it's so secluded you may never see it at all. But if you only see it on your PC as you prepare your taxes, that's good too. Google it and see the difference this fund makes. Kentucky's Nature and Wildlife Fund, the natural tax shelter.
At the absolute worst, it was a little white lie.
A little white lie.
After all, when it hit the line, it felt like a 15-pounder. It doesn't matter what the scale says. So it might be an ever so slight deviation from the truth.
Sometimes in fishing, the truth is hard to catch.
Maybe just a stretch.
But the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife reminds you, fishing isn't about math. It's about fun.
And fudging a little if you need to.
Kentucky Fishing.
It'll make a liar out of you.
Welcome to Kentucky Afield Radio. My name is Charlie Baglin, and if you fish or if you boat, you are my audience today. With the new year upon us, there are some new regulations, and you can find them outlined in the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife's website, or you can pick up a hard copy of all that. It's called the Kentucky Fishing and Boating Guide. Pick them up for free wherever you buy your license. 40-page magazine-style booklet, and there is no excuse not to have one of these. You can prevail upon its timely information often. My guest today has been a friend of mine for nearly 25 years, and not only is he a friend, he is an expert on fishing, and he has one of those names that's sort of similar to mine. One that's always mispronounced, always misspelled. Jerry Bynack, B-U-Y-N-A-K, the Assistant Director of Fisheries. And Mr. Bynack, are we ready?
Anytime.
Looking here at the Bible. Another name for the Bible is called the Kentucky Fishing and Boating Guide. This is the book that you were a contributor. Every year there seems to be some new things that come along. Can you get it to a point to where it's good for any number of years?
We try to do that, but there seems to always be something coming up. One of the big things, of course, is the Asian carp that are invading our waters. And over time, if their populations build up, we're going to have impacts to native fish populations, and we don't want to do that. And so there are things like that that come up every year that we have to adapt to and change. On
that subject, Director Brooks was on the show recently and talking about Asian carp. Is there a point, do you think, in Kentucky's future or in the Mississippi Valley's future where that will level off?
That's our goal. I mean, I don't think you can ever get rid of them all, but it's critical for us to be able to find somehow to control their numbers. And I think the commercial fishing aspect of it, developing markets, that sort of thing, will help us get to that point.
If you have this book in your boat or in your tackle box or anywhere, you may have a dozen of these. But in here, and I'm just paging through, page 3, it'll say new this year. If you see something in this guide that's highlighted in light blue, that means that it is new this year versus last year or in years past. And we can just page through some of these because I want to know what's new this year.
Okay, yeah, exactly. That's kind of helps people because if it's not in blue, it hasn't changed. So, like you said on page 3, and we'll start with the Asian carp that we just talked about a little bit ago. One of the changes this year, if you collect live bait from the wild, you have to be really careful. If you use live wild-caught Asian carp, shad, or skipjack, you can only use them alive in the water body from which they came. And I said at the beginning, using live Asian carp. One of the biggest problems, and the reason this reg is written that way, Asian carp, shad, herring, is when they're young, Asian carp look like
they all look alike.
All look alike. So you think you may have a shad, but it turns out to be an Asian carp. So you collect 100 of them for bait, and you take them from point A to Taylorsville Lake.
Yeah.
And you get done, and 9 times out of 10, you're not supposed to do, but a lot of people release the bait after they're done fishing. That's illegal. But if they do that, they could accidentally introduce Asian carp into, for example, like I said, Taylorsville Lake, and we don't want that.
If you are in Kentucky Lake and you catch shad and you may, I'm going to Barkley tomorrow, and you release them there, then you've done the same damage. Harrington, Taylorsville Lake, you name Corinth, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. Right, and we have them in Kentucky and Barkley Lake, and we have them in the tailwater. But a lot of people, too, go to the Ohio River to collect bait. We have them in the Ohio River, and the whole way up, gosh, they're into Virginia now. And so if they're taking bait from the Ohio River and fishing Bullock Pen, A.J. Jolly, lakes up in that area, they could accidentally introduce them there. And we've seen, other places have seen just devastating effects to sport fish populations. That's the reason for this. Now, you can collect live minnows. I had a call the other day. A guy wanted to know if he could collect crayfish and take them out of the water body. Yes, you can. It's only the shad, herring, and Asian carp that look like the other two.
That's the first thing that's highlighted in blue in the current fishing and boating guide for Kentucky. So Asian carp, shad, or skipjack herring may only be used in the waters from which they were collected.
Alive. If you want to take them, kill them, then you can use them anywhere.
I'm going to page along. I have a list here on page 3 that it sort of helps me, and I know it's noisy, but it helps me to just page through to see where I am, sort of puts this in greater context. If you don't mind, you're open to page 3, but I've advanced on to page 7.
Mm-hmm.
And I see here that Floyd's Fork, Jefferson County, largemouth and smallmouth bass from the bridge at US 60 downstream to the bridge at 150, US 150 highway, a 15-inch minimum size limit, and a one-fish daily creel. What brought this about?
That's kind of a preemptive move that we've done. Some of our stream guys that work on rivers and streams have been sampling that for the last couple of years. That section that you're talking about is called Parklands of Floyd's Fork. And it's going to be open, hopefully the whole entire park, which I think runs about 20 miles, includes 20 miles of Floyd's Fork. Sometime later in 2015, the entire park will be open. The sampling that we've done shows that there are pretty good size-wise largemouth bass, and particularly smallmouth, but the population numbers are relatively low. And so once that park opens and we get an influx of people fishing, pressure increasing, they could really devastate the numbers of fish over 12 inches. And prior to implementing this size limit this year, it was a statewide minimum 12-inch size limit. So
it was 12-inch, now 15.
Yeah, now 15. Well, it's about 20-mile stretch.
So again, that's from US 60, the bridge there. This is on Floyd's Fork in Jefferson County, Louisville area.
Right.
Down to the US 150 bridge.
Right. And like the work that they're doing there is going to improve access tremendously. And we've already seen a lot of people coming to the park, and I think that's going to increase. So when pressure increases, fish population numbers are low, they could really, in a year, virtually wipe out the quality fish that are there. There are other species there, too, that people can enjoy and take. Rock bass. We stock trout there. I forget the number, 2,500. and we're going to be expanding the numbers of trout that are being stocked there. So there are other species that they can enjoy to take home if they want to eat them.
You talked about the improvements being made along Floyd's Fork. What all is being done? I've heard this. It's gone in one ear and out the other, and not a lot of it is retained. I remember some years ago, that was a good canoe trail.
Correct.
And we canoed it, a group I was in called the Elkhorn Paddlers. Loved it. And I assume they're going to take that and just to improve upon it, more access, more what?
What I've heard is we've built, with their help, I guess, several canoe launch sites, and I think they're adding more canoe sites to it. I'm told there's a walking trail that virtually runs the length of the river. The access and the improvements that they've done is just phenomenal.
All right, I'll put you on the spot, Jerry. Floyd's Fork. Fork of what?
The Salt River.
The Salt River.
Yeah.
Good place to take a break, Jerry. We will turn the page on more updates. If you have a Kentucky fishing and boating guide in your possession and you're paging through and you see something highlighted in blue, that means it's new for this year, and that's what we're talking about this week on Kentucky Afield Radio. Back after the break. Charlie Bagman back on Kentucky Afield Radio. We are paging through the latest edition of the Kentucky Fishing and Boating Guide. It's hot off the presses and available now wherever you buy your fishing license. With me in the studio is one of the primary contributors to this guide. His name is Jerry Bynack, and Jerry is the second in command of the Kentucky Division of Fisheries. Moving on down the list, still on page 7, Fish Trap Lake. There is something highlighted in blue under that. Blue and channel catfish. Explain what's going on.
This reg is going to be a 15-fish daily creel limit, and only one fish in that creel limit can be longer than 25 inches.
This is good, but I don't remember from one year. I don't remember what it was last year. It would be neat if, and I know space is an issue, but it would
right.
be of interest to say, last year it was, now it's this.
Correct. Last year, actually, there were no size limits, no creel limits. Most catfish across the state are under that statewide reg, no creel, no size limit. We started trying to create a higher quality catfish fisheries in some of our reservoirs, and this particular creel and size limit actually started off at Taylorsville Lake. We started stocking blue catfish in Taylorsville probably 10 years ago, and the population numbers just went through the roof. We also saw at the time angler pressure and angler harvest just explode. And the blues, of course, have the potential of reaching 90, 100 pounds. And so to try to get 40, 50-pound fish in these lakes, we've got to protect some of them to get to that size. So that's the reason why one over 25 inches. The other thing is we could have tried to separate a blue catfish from channels, but even I have a hard time sometimes trying to distinguish a larger channel from a blue. So to make it easier on anglers, we just combined two species into one. Taylorsville, we're seeing really good results from the length limit change that's implemented there. There's been reports of like 40-pound blues come out of Taylorsville. The other goal with that is we got to protect the blues a little bit longer because they don't reach sexual maturity till they get 20, 30 pounds. And so if they all get yanked out of the lake, they'll never spawn, never create a self-sustaining fishery.
How does that equate lengthwise to weight-wise? If you have a 25-inch fish, what would that weigh roughly?
Roughly, let's see, a 30-inch fish is probably around 20 pounds or so. So it's a pretty good fish.
So you need a larger fish to be sexually mature.
Correct.
Be able to reproduce.
Right. And, you know, the blues reproduce in the Ohio River. They reproduce in Kentucky and Barkley Lake. Channel catfish reproduce at Taylorsville. They reproduce in most of our major reservoirs. So we really think they'll have a chance of reproducing if they can get big enough.
So, folks, in eastern Kentucky, a 15-fish daily limit. Only one of those can be longer than 25, and this is at Fish Trap Lake. So just keep that in mind if you're fishing at Fish Trap.
And while we're at it, talking about that particular length limit in creel, we also implemented it this year, and it's new this year, at Dewey Lake in eastern Kentucky. And we're hearing that the fish we started putting in there in Dewey Lake a few years ago are producing some really nice 20-pound plus fish right now.
So this works. This is what fisheries management is about.
Right. And if we don't have these limits, if we don't try to protect some of these fish, we won't be able to develop a quality fishery. I mean, to me, it'd be great for a little kid to go out there and catch a 20 or 30-pound blue catfish. I can hear him screaming right now. Catfish,
is that considered in Kentucky a sport fish?
No.
Is there a trophy catfish?
Well, we have in fisheries a trophy fish program, and you can send in a picture of your catch and receive an award, basically, for it. And I think, off the top of my head, trophy blue catfish is 35 or 38 inches in length. Channel catfish is something like 28 inches. So if you catch one larger than that, turn it in, get an award. And those lengths that I'm talking about are also in this book, and the program, how you do it and how you get your awards and such is explained in this book too.
We are talking about this book being a publication of the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife, the Kentucky Fishing and Boating Guide. It is for March 2014 through February of 2015. That is the license year. So it's basically for the year 2014 and a couple of months into next year. And Jerry Byanak is the guest and a contributor to this publication. Lee McClellan is the author. Well, I don't know if he's the author. He's the editor.
He's the editor. He's the guy that puts it all together.
He's got the work.
Yes, exactly. Our part's easy.
He's got to get it right. He has to take what you tell him, fisheries biologist that you are, and translate that into understandable English.
Well, he does. We talk biology, and he puts it in English, so he does a real good job at that.
Let's page through. What we're doing was talking about the changes from last year to this year. And if you have one of these, and you should, keep one in your tackle box or your truck. If there's something new, then it is highlighted in blue. Live bait for personal use is something we talked about, but this is the next illustration that's in blue on page 10. Again, about Asian carp, skipjack herring, live caught. You may confuse this for shad. If you do it, keep them in the same water if it's living. The next instance of something in blue.
Might want to go back to page 9. I think we missed one.
I did. Trammell Creek.
Trammell Creek, Allen County.
All trout caught between October 1 and March 31st, that's your typical seasonal catch and release trout season, must be immediately released, and only artificial baits shall be used during that period. We have a brown trout 16-inch minimum size limit, 1 fish daily creel. So we're talking the difference between brown trout and rainbow trout here, right?
Correct. And
does seasonal catch and release apply only to rainbow or any trout?
No, it's all trout. All trout caught from October 1 through March 31 are included. That's the way this little blue reg is reading right now. All trout. It doesn't say rainbow. So it's all trout during that period, including rainbow and brown, must be released. So outside that period, what we have is a 16-inch minimum size limit on brown trout, 1 fish daily. So from April 1 through end of September, 16-inch size limit, 1 for brown. Rainbow during that time period is 8 fish creel, no size limit. So it's a put and take type fishery. The idea behind the seasonal catch and release is what we see when we do a lot of these trout stockings. In a couple days, if there's a lot of pressure, they're gone. They're harvested. And so to create a winter, fall fishery for people that are avid trout fishermen, the seasonal catch and release allow the fish no harvest, so they're in the stream longer for people that want to practice that kind of fishing.
And April 1st is the best day to fish, probably on the calendar.
Yeah, and then a lot of our stockings for the put and take fisheries, trout fisheries, occur in March and April. So there's a lot of fish available, right at the beginning of the put and take period. One of the reasons we went to this at Trumbull Creek, it's one of our higher quality trout streams, and there are some areas there, particularly in the upper portion of the creek, where there's year-round trout fisheries. So the brown trout, 16-inch one over, should result on down the road that we're going to see some pretty nice fish in there, because it's going to be holdover fish.
Let's move on through the book. We're talking about things that are new for fishing and boating, basically in the year 2014. We have covered the live bait for personal use. And what's the next one, Jerry?
Same thing on page 10 of this fishing guide. We made some changes to the use of sport fish cast nets. That is occurring only in the Cumberland River tailwater. Up until now, there were only 2 streams that people in the tailwater were allowed to collect bait with a cast net to use for, say, striped bass in the tailwater. A number of anglers have asked for several other streams to be open. And we got to thinking about it, that why not open them all, because the fear was people are going to go in there with a cast net and keep trout. Then we realized it's illegal to use a cast net to take game fish. So to make it real easy and not complicate anything, we opened up all tributaries below Lake Cumberland to cast netting for bait fish, except Hatchery Creek that flows through Wolf Creek National Fish Hatchery. So it just makes it a little bit easier, makes it less complicated just to open them all up.
Jerry, the music is playing. What's new? What's blue? If it's highlighted in blue of this year's edition of the Kentucky Fishing and Boating Guide, then it's something you should pay attention to, because it's new and updated. That is what we are talking about, Jerry Byanak and I. And Jerry is one of the principal dudes who has helped put this together. He is the assistant director of the Kentucky Division of Fisheries. More after the break and our fishing report. This is Kentucky Afield Radio. This is Charlie Baglin on Kentucky Afield Radio. I'd love to hear from you. Get your thoughts, ideas, show suggestions, comments, all easy to do on our Facebook page. Look us up at Kentucky Afield Radio. I think as you do that, you'll find Kentucky Afield TV also has a page. You can like us both. It is time now for our fishing report.
This is Jeff Crosby with the Central District Fishing Report. Fishing across the district remains slow due to poor water conditions due to weather. Water temperatures are running in the upper 30s at many of our lakes and streams across the district, with a few of them being still a little ice covered. The species of interest right now would be sauger, which are beginning to stage below many of our locks and dams on the Ohio and Kentucky rivers. They can be caught on a variety of lures such as live minnows or a variety of jigs, spoons, or any type of minnow imitating lure can be used to catch these fish. Please observe all boating regulations when fishing below these locks and dams due to dangerous water conditions. But finally, don't forget, March 1st marks the start of a new fishing year. Don't forget to purchase your new 2014 fishing license today at your local sporting goods store. Hope to see you on the water.
In western Kentucky, Kentucky Lake, Barkley Lake, this looks like it's going to be a halfway decent crappie year. Of course, the first part of March is starting out a little rough with the weather, but soon to warm up, and those crappie, they ought to start biting out on the ledges, fishing vertical jigs, minnows, spider rigging. Drift fishing is a big thing this time of year before the fish start moving up shallow. So I'm looking for a pretty good crappie year. The bass, as soon as the weather starts warming up, ought to be moving up onto the gravel bars, enjoying that sunshine. So throwing some crankbaits, lizards, worms around woody structure. Also, Alabama rig's still a big thing this time of the year, fishing out deeper around the ledges. Below the dams, the gates have been open, so the tailwaters are still pretty rough. So we'll just wait for the weather to get a little bit better, and fishing ought to pick up then. Well, this is Paul Reister, and hope you find a good warm day to go fishing.
This is Jeremy Shiflett with a fishing update from the Northwest District. With the weather improving after this last round of ice and snow, fishing should pick up quickly as well. Both Rough River Lake and Nolan River Lakes have crested and should be back to winter pool in a couple of days. However, the Corps usually begins holding water on or around March 15th. At both reservoirs, anglers have been successful spider rigging for crappie along the channel and fishing with minnows on brush piles 12 to 15 feet deep. In our smaller lakes, trout were stocked again on Friday, March 7th in Madisonville City Park, Morton's Lake, and Sandy Watkins Park, Otter Creek Outdoor Rec Area, and Otter Creek on Fort Knox, along with Dickerson Lake on Fort Knox, were stocked with trout on Thursday, March 6th. There should also be trout left on Peabody WMA as well, as those fish went in while most waters were still frozen over. As the weather improves, so will the fishing. Good luck and be safe.
Charlie Baglin is my name. You are listening to Kentucky Afield Radio, and the Kentucky Fishing and Boating Guide, published annually and yours free wherever you buy your fishing license, is the topic this week. What's new this year you should pay attention to? Back with more in a sec.
It's time to register for Kentucky's elk hunts. This is Tim Farmer. The Kentucky Fish and Wildlife website is Elk Central and the only place to enter this year's draw. Elk hunting in Old Kentucky. Take it from me, there's nothing like it. 1,000 names will be drawn, and with the Pick 2 option, you gotta like your odds. The deadline is midnight, April 30th. The Kentucky Elk Draw. Enter at fw.ky.gov. Again, fw.ky.gov.
At the absolute worst, it was a little white lie.
A little white lie.
After all, when it hit the line, it felt like a 15-pounder. It doesn't matter what the scale says. So it might be an ever so slight deviation from the truth.
Sometimes in fishing, the truth is hard to catch.
Maybe just a stretch.
But the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife reminds you, fishing isn't about math. It's about fun.
And fudging a little if you need to.
Kentucky Fishing.
It'll make a liar out of you.
Kentucky Field Radio, we are back at it, and Jerry Bienack is my guest. I'm Charlie Baglin. Jerry is the Assistant Director with the Kentucky Division of Fisheries, so he's a man in the know, and we're looking at what has changed from last year to this year in the Kentucky Fishing and Boating Guide. A few regulation changes you should be aware of before you head out with that new fishing license. Jerry, I'm looking for the next thing, blue. At page 13, the dates June 7 and 8, 2014, may not mean much. What in the world is June 7th and 8th? And that is what we call Free Fishing Weekend.
Correct. And that's where anybody, residents, non-residents, can go fish and enjoy fishing without a license that weekend.
That weekend, 7 and 8, is that a Saturday, Sunday, or Friday?
Yes, Saturday, Sunday.
So it would be the first Saturday and Sunday of every June, the first full weekend of the month.
Yep, first full weekend in June. And during that time period, the other thing that a lot of communities, we do ourselves, have fishing events. We stock our Upper Sportsman's Lake, for example, with quality catfish, sunfish, and have kids fishing events, adult fishing events. And I didn't come out last year, but the year before I was here, and it was literally elbow to elbow. And people were enjoying it. I heard some people say they just left because they couldn't even find a place to fish.
Not funny, but no. It's nice to see that many people take an interest.
Exactly. From grandparents down to 3-year-old kids.
More on this Free Fishing Weekend, June 7th and 8th of 2014. That means you do not have to have a license. However, you still have to abide by size limits, creel limits. What are the other basic rules you need to remember? Do you need a trout stamp?
You need a trout stamp. No, you don't need a trout stamp doing Free Fishing Weekend. So all the licenses in terms of fishing are waived those 2 days.
Okay, all licenses are waived. With the hope being that, hey, this is fun. Maybe you don't get to fish very often. Maybe you're busy, got a family, got a job, career, 80-hour-a-week thing.
Right.
But you try it, and this is kind of fun. I remember doing this earlier in my life.
It's fun. It's a family event. And, hard economic times, you can catch a mess of fish, take them home, and have a meal.
You can read more about Free Fishing Days in Kentucky on page 14 of this year's Kentucky Fishing and Boating Guide. On page 15, if I haven't skipped over anything, I see the next piece that says highlighted in blue. In Kentucky, a person may not snag within 200 yards below any dam on the Ohio River.
That's not really new. That's just to tell people that you can't snag in those areas. We get a lot of complaints. We get a lot of people in those areas. As a matter of fact, the only thing you can do within 200 yards of the dam is use pole and line.
So you're downstream of the dam,
And you cannot snag.
And snagging is basically a large rod with a large hook and weight on it, and you throw it out as far as you can, and you pull on the rod as hard as you can to try to get those hooks sunk into a fish. And within 200 yards of dam, one of the reasons that is off limit is that's where a lot of fish congregate. And so it'd be pretty easy to...
It's an unfair chase.
Yeah, in a way.
Is that the reason? I was wondering if it may be the turbulence bubbling from the dam.
There's some danger, but that's where a lot of, certain times of the year, our paddlefish come into, and that sort of thing. So, and big catfish. And there a lot of people fish those areas. So, I wouldn't want to get hit in the head with a 3-pound weight, not that big, but, so, and a big hook. So it's part safety. It's part that there are a lot of fish in those areas that just need to be left alone.
Something to remember if you fish the Ohio River. Turning the pages. I like this section that we've just come to here. They are more brown. It gives you general information about the fish that you are catching, what a brown trout looks like, what a rainbow trout looks like. Can you tell the difference between a striped bass and a white bass, or a hybrid striped bass? A lot of these, you think you know, but then you catch one and you're sort of confused.
Yep.
It's got to be tough. But there are illustrations here. I'm assuming these are all drawings, paintings. Rick Hill. It looks like a Rick Hill portion of the booklet here. Rick Hill is a famous wildlife artist for Kentucky. But this goes into detail. Blue cat, channel cat, bluegill. Yeah, all the fish that you are likely to catch. It'll let you know what it is. Cumberland darter. This is an interesting column here because it has the Kentucky threatened and endangered species. I see 5. So, the black-side dace, Cumberland darter. Pronounce this for me.
Pale zone shiner.
Pale zone shiner. Looks like a nifty lure. Looks sort of like an AC shiner.
And, of course, you have the relic darter and tuxedo darter.
While we're on the subject, if these are threatened and endangered, how is it that fisheries biologists, the Kentucky Division of Fisheries, sort of monitors their level? And are there any that are maybe going to make a comeback? Could they be delisted? What's the status?
We have a separate section in the division, Matt Thomas and Stephanie Brandt, that are, I like to call them our minnow darter people. So they do a lot of work with non-game species. They're working with the minnows, the darters, the shiners that are in their streams. And I believe they have a couple projects where they're trying through another entity to raise some of these species and in the lab hatcheries and stock them back in streams to try to maintain them. I'm not sure you can ever get them delisted from the list. If they're on that threatened and endangered species list, there are not too many of them out there.
But at least there's some still in existence and some work's being done, and hopefully...
Right, and one of the big things with them, just because there are these 5 that are endangered, there are many, many, many more other in the state that are in trouble. Low numbers. So one of their jobs, too, not only to protect these threatened ones, is to try to keep those other ones off the list, try to improve habitat, try to protection, stream improvement, that kind of stuff.
Let's say you're a typical Joe and you look at a stream and say, well, it's habitat. There's a stream, there's water in it. So what's missing from that water to make it good habitat? What got in the way? What caused them to be imperiled?
Well, quite simply man and his activities. Mining, building a strip mall, and tearing up the land and silt coming in. You have agriculture runoff, fertilizers, chemicals, and the list goes on and on. But in a nutshell, it's man and our activities that are damaging the environments and creating stress on these species.
talking about the 2014 into 2015 Kentucky Fishing and Boating Guide and what is new this year. It's a good publication to keep with you. Fishing regulations are covered, general information about the fish you are most likely to catch, Kentucky's trout waters, the trophy fish program, boating, and anything you may not understand. There's a nice little nifty glossary in the back that'll teach you some new words. Trout waters. Here on page 23, Jerry Byanak, some things that are highlighted in blue. And as you page through this, say, why is that in blue? That means it's new this year. And there are a few things on here. Catch and release only, except on the Cumberland River, right up there for brook trout.
Right. It's one, again, not one of those that are new this year. It's kind of put in the book to highlight this thing, because we're finding people have a little bit of confusion with identifying brook trout for one thing. But in this book it says brook trout, all brook trout are supposed to be caught and release. And so we wanted to tell people that's not necessarily the case, that below Lake Cumberland tailwater, we stock brook trout, and we want to let them know that they can keep one there. In the Poor Forks, Dog Forks, the brook trout streams in eastern Kentucky, it's no harvest. But in Cumberland River, you can take one brook trout.
You can take one with a 15-inch size limit.
Right. And I think we've heard that there's some confusion on how you identify brook trout, and them thinking it may be a rainbow trout. Brook trout, if you look at the guide and you look at the pictures, the spots are the telltale sign. The body of the fish is dark, the spots are light. On a rainbow trout and a brown trout, the body is light and the spots are dark.
I see that.
And so that's one characteristic that really separates brook trout from the other two species.
Where's the next page with anything blue on it, if we hit it all?
No, there's one more.
Page 26, that you're talking about Morton's Lake, Higginson Henry. This is basically trout stockings, right?
Yeah, those are our lakes that we stock with trout. And the blue there means that they were added to our lake stockings. A lot of those lakes that are listed there are in our FINS program. And FINS is the Fishing in Neighborhoods program. They're located in heavily populated areas, urban areas. They're stocked multiple times a year, and I think there are 39 lakes in like 23 or 4 counties. So over half the population of the state are within like 30 minutes of these lakes.
I like that program. It's good fishing close to home. You want a place you can go, take the kids, go by yourself, girlfriend, whatever.
Family friendly, parks, benches, bathrooms, everything that you need.
You can't beat them. You want a good place to go, not so far from the house, and you can go and you can have a good time. Maybe you'll come back again. But it looks like 3 lakes have been added to that list here that are highlighted in blue. Morton's Lake, that's at the Higginson Henry Wildlife Management Area, the Owensboro area. We will hit them all and wrap it up in our next segment. What's new is highlighted in blue in the Kentucky Fishing and Boating Guide. Get one now if you don't have for the 2014 fishing year. More to come. This is Kentucky Afield Radio.
Charlie Baglin back on Kentucky Afield Radio. Jerry Byanak in the studio with me, a fisheries expert. And we're paging through the Kentucky Fishing and Boating Guide, the new one for the 2014 license year, seeing what's new, seeing what's changed. We are up now to the page that talks about trout stockings. New places to fish for trout.
Peabody Wildlife Management Area, Ohio County, Muhlenberg County, Flycatcher Pond. And we didn't mention any numbers here, but that is a 1-acre pond. It'll get 15 over the course of a year, 1,500 rainbow trout.
Correct.
Sandy Watkins Park Lake. That is in Henderson. Looks like we'll be getting about 1,000 rainbow trout there in the months of February and March each year, 3-acre lake. What else is highlighted in blue, Jerry?
I think if we go back to page 3, there's another size limit change that we put into effect. Smoky Valley Lake in Carter County.
That's at Carter Cave State Resort Park.
Yeah.
It has two names, Smoky Valley and Carter Caves Lake.
Right. It's a small lake. Years ago, if I remember correctly, it was our first trophy bass lake. I remember Lou Corman recommending that, and it did okay for a while, but then what our sampling has shown is that population of bass kind of shifted, and we now have a ton of small bass, very few over 12 inches. And so we went to this 12 to 15 inch protected slot to allow some of those small bass to grow into a little bit bigger size to increase the quality of the fishery. The other thing that's kind of interesting about that lake is anglers that fish that lake, keep fish. And so anything that made it over the 12-inch minimum size limit was basically harvested.
Cheaper than going to the grocery store.
Exactly. And so now they can keep 6 fish daily, of which only 1 can be over 15 inches, but they can take home 6 10-inch fish. I'd rather eat a 10-inch bass than a 10-pound bass. So smaller fish are pretty good to eat. And by taking some of those small fish, it'll help improve the growth rates, reduce the competition, and the whole goal is then fish will grow into the protected slot. There'll be a lot more numbers of 12 to 15-inch fish, and then there'll be fish that make it up over 15 inches to hopefully 20 inches. So we need to thin out some of those small fish, and this is a way to do that.
So that wraps up everything in blue that relates to fishing. There is one boating change. We'll make a mention of this. The maximum length for pontoon boats on Gist Creek Lake in Shelby County is now extended to 24 feet, and it used to be, and here's one of those examples, well, what was it?
Right.
Okay, and they actually mentioned it here. It used to be 22, and now it's up to 24 for pontoons.
Correct. Of course, that hasn't anything to do with management. That's more of a public, personal type thing. And it actually came about as a result of an individual at Gist Creek Lake came to our commission meeting and asked that be raised because he had a 24-foot boat, and was our law enforcement people said that's illegal. You have to remove him from the lake. So rather than him having to get rid of his boat, having to sell it and buy a smaller boat, the reg was changed because it's not really impacting anybody.
Let me ask you then, you work with the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife. That's a public agency, and you want to do two things. Have a good, healthy population of fish biologically, which I'm going to say the vast majority of the citizenry doesn't understand to the extent that you do. But fishermen, fisherwomen, kids want to be able to catch good fish. And so how much do you have to listen to what anglers want? And that winds up being one of the things here in this booklet that is highlighted. How do they affect what you do in management?
They're a very important part. You have to have public input. I have to know if they'll accept what you might present to try to improve a fishery. As a matter of fact, we just completed a statewide trout angler survey, mail survey, asking anglers for their opinions, presenting them with options we might consider doing if we had their support. We also completed a statewide catfish angler survey. We used that information to create and hopefully pass regs on catfish in the Ohio River. And soon we'll be doing one statewide survey for all anglers that will be presenting ideas, asking for their opinions, and if we get support for a thing, then we'll change it if it's going to improve fishing and we have the support. So it's critical to have public support.
In the Northwest District, Fred Howes and Company, who's the district biologist there, what all are they looking to do to improve fishing in their district? He's made mention of this a couple times on the fishing report.
Cave Run is I've worked on Cave Run for years with the guys up there in the district. It's a It's a clear lake. It's an infertile lake. It has some vegetation. Fish populations there, in terms of bass, have gone through the roof. They're difficult to catch. They're in the process of planning right now for a major habitat improvement program at Cave Run. And hopefully it'll begin this summer. The habitat that'll be added, first of all, is fish attractors. It'll bring those big bass, crappie, sport fish into the shallower areas, keep them there, make them more easily accessed by anglers. The other thing we think it'll do, and we're looking at it in another project at Guest Creek Lake, we think that it'll actually increase fish production, increase health of the fish, increase the weight of the fish. Not only do the habitat attract predator fish, but it attracts prey fish. And so you put the food in close proximity to the predators. The other cool thing about the habitat is bugs, insects, algae colonize that habitat. And so, in a way, you're increasing the food chain in the lake, increasing the fish health, increasing the fish weight, numbers, and making them accessible to anglers. So it's win-win.
So if you took a stream and filled it with water from your garden hose and put fish in it, they wouldn't last.
No. And then on the other end of the spectrum, if you put them in a cow pasture where there's too many nutrients coming into that water body, you can't raise fish either. So there's a happy medium.
Always ask, do you text and drive?
No. I try not to even keep the phone on when I'm driving.
Jerry, thanks for being on the show.
Anytime.
Meanwhile, this is Charlie Baglin, and hope you will join us again in a week when we will go inside outdoors again, right here on Kentucky Afield Radio.